Welcome to session 10 of the My Ground Force sponsored webinar series, Prosper During the FedEx Transformation, Learn to Think Like a Fortune 500 Executive. And so today we're going to talk about decision making as a science. I would think that for the most part, not many people think about decision making as a science, but one of the key reasons that you can be a successful contractor is how you make decisions. And so we're going to talk about that today. It is a absolutely critical skill that you need to work on all the time. So we're going to talk about decisions today and how you do them and what your methods might be. And then I'm going to show you some science related to decision making, the decision making process itself. Look, I didn't get out any books on this because there's plenty of books on it to go through this and give you an academic discussion. I'm trying to give you in this webinar series things that you can actually action. You can watch this webinar, make some notes, and take action on it. If you want my help, then you know how to reach me. You just email me at support@mygroundforce.com, and I can help you. All right, so we're going to have poll questions along the way. Please participate. If you have a question as we go, at the bottom of your screen is your webinar toolbar. Please drop into the Q&A, send the question, and that we get to the end, and we'll take your questions, and anything is fair game. So here we go. As you know, my Navy coffee cup's going to make some appearances here, so bear with me on that. Okay, so what are the fundamental elements of decision making? Now, this is Tim Goff's version of this, as all of this has been, but I would say that it's relatively solid in that sense. It's not the Tim Goff decision book, but it's close. So to make a decision, you have to start. What is a problem? And you might find that this is way harder to answer than you might initially, because that I have learned in my corporate history is people run off to solve things without first understanding exactly what the problem was. And so let's break down what is a problem. Essentially, a problem is when a result does not meet the expectation. So if this is your expectation and the result comes in here, that gap is your problem. And you need to understand why that is, right? It could be anything, right? I don't know. Maybe your faucet is not working right at home, or you can't get a truck to start. It's all these things. And there's a methodology that you go through to be successful and do it as fast as you can. Obviously, velocity matters. We're going to talk about that a lot in this presentation. It could be that an issue comes up. Maybe you hear an issue on one of these webinars, and you're like, well, I wonder if we need to incorporate a standardized methodology of decision making in my company. Now, remember one of the things I've said, I don't know, it might have been session 5, that the organization is going to take on the personality of the leader. Okay, and so everything you do is role modeling what your organization is going to do. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get everybody to make decisions, make the decision that you would make if you were there. But you can't be everywhere all the time, 24/7, 365. Okay, so what that means then is you have to teach your team how you do things. And one of the ways you can do that is through standardization. Hence the question that we asked, do you have a formal decision-making process? It's something you want to spend some time thinking about and teach your people on how you want to go about it. And so let's talk about how you might go about it. So then what is a decision? Well, you've had a problem, you've done some analysis, and now you're going to decide what to do about it. So it's a choice that you make about something after you've thought about several possibilities. And remember what I said when we talked about problem. In order to be successful in solving problems, and remember, the resolution of a problem comes from a decision. And the first step in making that decision is understanding the problem. But in order to understand the problem, you have to know what was the expectation. If you didn't set any expectations, How do you know you had a problem? How do your people know that they have a problem if we haven't set expectations across the organization? And we talked about that in session 6. So, and then what is the result? If you can't, you might have an expectation, but if you can't measure results accurately, then how do you define your problem? How do you know what to go work on when something's not going right? So what I'm trying to do today is help you think about decisions more scientifically. There are fundamental elements that you need to understand and incorporate in how you do things and role model it and teach it to your organizations, or we can help you teach it, however you want to do it. All right, so we talked about what is a problem, and then a decision is a choice. Now, we're back to session 5, our quality principles. Remember, we don't forget these. These are fundamental planks on how our company operates. And when you go to make decisions, you have to manage with facts and data. You're going to keep customer satisfaction in mind. You're going to make sure you're taking care of the humans in your company. But look, you have to manage with facts and data. And if you can't do that right now, you have to create the way that you can manage with facts and data. Okay, so that means you have to get command of the data. It's one of the reasons my ground force exists. I, as a contractor, needed to get command of the data so I could be better, and I created it. And yeah, we sell it to customers, but it would have still been a great decision for me if no one ever bought it, because I got a system of record and complete command of the data in my company, and I could make decisions and teach other people how to make decisions because we all work from the same data set. I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to have command of the data in your company. And we're going to talk about some very famous examples of that as we go through this presentation. So once you have a problem and you've figured out that you need to make a decision and using the facts and data to address this problem, you got to prioritize it. Not every problem can be worked on at the same time. You can't do it. And so as a CEO, you have to establish a methodology of prioritizing things in your company. And one way to do that is create procedures and write them down, and then script how you want things to flow. And at decision points, you give folks 2 or 3 options. You never want just 2 options, so at least 3 options. And then you define what situation would you choose each one of those options. And then you have effectively controlled the decision-making process through a written process, and you weren't involved. This is how you get efficient in your organization and how you replicate yourself throughout your organization, right? So, and part of those processes is going to be how to prioritize things, and we're going to work on that today. And the other thing you have to evaluate is this particular problem, is it tactical or strategic? I mean, do I have to have an answer and it's going to affect how I'm going to operate this afternoon, or that's going to change the velocity required to execute the decision process? Or is this a strategic analysis that's going to affect how my company proceeds in the future? Now, we're going to talk strategy next week, not trying to solve that this week, but we've talked a little bit of tactical decision-making along the way. You got to be able to execute with facts and data and make good decisions and train your people to do it in the context of the FedEx ground operation. But sometimes that same data can enable strategic analysis. And we talked about that in session 7 when we did metrics. So that's part, making strategic decisions needs to follow the same kind of standardized approach, managed with facts and data. Otherwise, and we're going to talk about it in session 12, a misanalysis of your strategic direction can help you go from a good company to a bad company. And we're going to spend some time on that. Okay. So what is the appropriate decision method for circumstance, right? So and sometimes you just need to decide something. You've got all the facts and data you need. You don't need to consult with somebody. People in your organization don't need to consult with somebody. Your maintenance tech looks at this, the computer tells him X, he knows Y. Okay, so there's decisions happening in your company all the time, and you want to know how those decisions are getting made so that your company is operating the way you want it to. And it's going to take you to think about that, right? Or you could just delegate. I talked about delegating through a procedure. That's a great way to delegate. You're still in control of the process, assuming your people execute the procedure, but it doesn't require you to be there. It could be that you bring in one of your people and you say, okay, I've got this facts and data. We got this issue. I need you to go get this done, make the right decision. I trust you to handle it. You got to train people to be able to do that, right? Then there's this concept of consensus where you get people together and you sit around the table and you talk about all the options and everybody kind of comes to the same conclusion. Maybe you do that in a family setting. I'm not a huge fan of consensus decision making in a corporate world because it diffuses responsibility and accountability, right? If you're in a team environment, then maybe we all get on the same situation. Is it a family? Is it a sport? Whatever it might be. But look, in a company, somebody has to be in charge. We used to say, who is the ONTG? If you can't give me the one neck to grab, then we're not going to work on it. If it's not worth identifying somebody to be in charge and be accountable for what happens, we're not going to work on it. I recommend that process to you. And then you can have the vote process. And I've done this a few times where you get very skilled people together. It's a very complicated decision. This process might take some time, days or weeks, and you evaluate a whole series of potential options. You score those options. People vote on these options. And then that kind of helps drive you. And you're doing you're constantly doing analysis of what all the options are as you whittle them down from 5 to 4 to 3, so that you're making well-informed decisions to get where you want to go. That might be a process that you would follow if you were wanting to work with a business partner or some of your leadership team to do an acquisition or to decide to sell off part of your team, or it might be your accountant and your business coach or whatever. So that might be something that you want to use. Now, one of the most important things in decision making is you have to have a clear mind. And this is a huge challenge as a contractor because you got things coming at you all the time. So I'm going to share with you what I've been doing and what I've coached my people to do for about 25 years. And every person I teach it to loves it. So here you go. Every day, set aside 20 minutes. You can use a notebook or you can use a whiteboard, whichever one you want to do. But if you're going to use a whiteboard, it probably needs to be one of the big ones, okay? And every day at the same time, you sequester yourself. And let's say we're using the whiteboard. And then you just write down on that whiteboard everything that's in your mind. Just write it down. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, I got tire issues on this truck. I got a kid's softball game tonight. I have to take my wife to dinner on Friday. Just whatever's in your mind, write it down. Spend 20 minutes doing that. Stop. Get on with your day. The next day, come back. Now, let's say we started on Monday. The next day, you come back at the same time, 20 minutes. Write everything down that's in your mind that you haven't already written. You do that. 20 minutes, you stop, you leave. Do that again on Wednesday. What you're starting to see is that you're writing down fewer and fewer things every day. And then you're going to get to a point in which everything that's on your mind or you're thinking of has already appeared on that board. Okay, and so now what you're going to do is you're going to sit and look at your board. And you're going to look at all these things that you wrote down. And you're going to think through them 20 minutes a day at the same time every day. And then what you're going to find is some of those things are going to go away. You're just going to say, okay, I thought of that, but it's not appropriate anymore. It's not really applicable. You take it off the board. The other thing you're going to see is, oh, well, maybe I can take this one and these three and glue them together, and it creates something else. And then over the course of time of studying what's on the board, you're going to continue to whittle it down, and you're going to be moving things together, combining things into the same, let's call it a project, whatever it might be. And then you're going to prioritize those. And then when you go through that prioritization process, you might say, "Ah, man, I don't know what I was thinking. I should not have even. I don't need to worry about that anymore. Things could have changed, whatever." And so when you get to the end of this, it's going to take you 5 days, 6 days to do this. So a couple hours of dedicated work. You're going to have decluttered your mind, and you're going to have prioritized all the things that you need, that in your mind you need to look at. And then you can start taking action on those. It's really key. Decision making is that you don't okay? You don't get into the blue yellow swirl, I've called it in the past, between being handicapped by data and handicapped about, oh, well, it could be this, it could be that. So the data as opposed to strategic development, and you get into this blue yellow swirl, I call it. You got to avoid that. So make a decision and move forward on each one of those things at the proper time, at the proper pace. But now you've decluttered your mind, and you just consistently do that every day, so that when other things come to you, there's space in your mind for you to take that in and make an informed, uncluttered decision. Give it a try. I promise you will love it. All right, so decision-making process. It is a tool, okay, that you use to get decisions done. And in your case, it's going to benefit a specific group, your company, your family, your softball team, whatever it is, okay? But it's a way of thinking about getting things done. That's what we've done in this entire webinar series. We're no longer running our line haul companies shooting from the hip. We're defining everything that can be done in a line haul company, and we're managing the hell out of it, because we're going to get better. And you're going to avoid being bronze if you do that, okay? You get bronze a couple quarters in a row, you may be on the way to an opportunity to cure. I love that word, opportunity, right? So that's a contract remedy that you want to avoid, because the downside is huge. So the decision-making process allows you to explore all your alternatives, which means you got to get creative. Now, exploring all our alternatives is a function of velocity, right? You might not be able to explore all opportunities or alternatives before you have to send that truck out at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So time is always an impact. Decisions get made. But the goal here is to refine how your company operates to the point that you can ensure that you're always getting to the best solution. And now remember, we don't want perfect. Perfect is always the enemy of good, okay? It can get to good enough and you can execute, but if you keep in that blue yellow swirl trying to get to perfect, you don't get anything done. Okay, so if somebody in your team starts to do that, this is why somebody has to be in charge and make a decision. So here's some steps that you can use, and there's different methodologies, but they essentially all contain these steps in one way, form, or define the problem, identify what you need to do, assess the various options, then consider them, might need to go get some more data, might need to talk to somebody. Now you're going to implement. Implement means do something. Make a decision and go do something. And then evaluate what you did. This is what we call future-proofing the decision, okay? So I've always told my people, 80% of solving the problem is picking a direction and start walking. Because as you proceed, options start to fall away, others begin to be obvious, and you'll get in the right direction. You make a slight course correction. But if you just stand around and spin, you never get anywhere. So don't do that. Make a decision, start moving. Then evaluate the decision you made with new data and make a course correction. These are all the fundamental of every decision-making method we're going to talk about today. These are the key elements. All right, and your method that you're going to use needs to match the priority of the decision. Okay, here's what I love. I do this. This is my go-to right here. If you're not using this, you absolutely should consider making this the core of how you operate. Okay, so Eisenhower, as you know, ran the biggest military, what would you say, organization, the Allied effort in World War II in Europe is easily the largest military organization ever put together. Millions and millions, okay? And he was the guy. He was the one neck to grab. And so you can imagine how busy he was. I mean, it's hard to even contemplate. So he created, Eisenhower was a tremendously smart guy who had been identified as a terribly smart guy, worked for George Marshall in the Pentagon, was another incredibly smart guy. And he put together this decision making. And it's this, it's either urgent or not urgent, and it's either important or not important. Okay, if it's urgent and important, this is what you work on. And you've heard me say this in this webinar series. Okay, first focus on important tasks that need to be done the same day. Okay, that means the velocity of the decision or the priority is big. Okay, what if it's important but not urgent? Okay, and you have to learn how to categorize these things. I can't tell you what they are, but you can, because it's based on how you cleared your mind and how things are working in your life and what business you're running, then this is going to define urgent or not urgent. So if it's not urgent, but it's important, you schedule that. Okay, I'm going to get that done, and I'm going to get it done here. Now notice what's going on here is this is not a swirl. Decisions are getting made in these boxes. So there's some decision method that's getting implemented. You might say, I have an important and urgent issue. I need to pull these 3 guys in. We have this data set. We're going to make this decision. It's got to get done today. Bam. Somebody called in and you're going to find that FedEx has told you you better begin. Oh, that would be urgent and important, okay? Now, if it's urgent but not important, you're going to have somebody else do that. So it's something that has to be done, but it's not really important to you. Okay, so delegate that, and then you get to the not urgent, not important, and what they like to say is, you don't do it. Now, I have a little bit of a problem with that, because if you ever came to my office, you would see a pile of things sitting around that are not urgent and not important, and I never get to them, and it just keeps getting taller. And so that's a defect in how I manage my own time. I'm stretched all the time in paperwork and admin. I just stack it up, and I shouldn't, but I do it because I categorize it in the don't do box. Okay, so this is an outstanding way to think about decision. Prioritization and decision making in this context is highly effective. There's a couple other things that Eisenhower did, but this one really stuck. Try limiting yourself to no more than 8 tasks per quadrant, right? You can't overload yourself. That means you're having some priority issues, and you need to prioritize in each one of those quadrants. Remember this, it's not about collecting things to do, it's about getting things done. That's why the SEALs say the first thing you do every morning when you get up is make your bed. You got something done. You're off to a good start on the day. Think about it like that. Keep one list for business and private. That way you can't say one or the other you never worked on. Don't let you or others distract you. Okay, we talked about setting aside that 20 minutes, okay? You know, plan in the morning, work on your stuff, and however you want to do it, but make sure you get stuff done. And then look, procrastination is the enemy of success. And it's really easy to procrastinate. It's really easy to get on your computer and you have something to do. And the next thing you know, you've been surfing the internet for 2 hours and you got nothing done. Surfing the internet is fun. I don't play video games, but I guess that's fun. But sometimes that's really just another form of procrastination. And so maybe make sure you're keeping that in mind. All right. So now we're going to talk about something that's very famous. Okay, let me make sure I got things going on. Okay. It's called the OODA loop. The OODA loop was invented by Colonel Boyd of the U.S. Air Force. I learned it as a Navy pilot. My son is an Air Force pilot. They live, eat, and breathe the OODA loop. If you just talk to them, They're constantly talking about getting in the loop. This is where that come from. And in particular, getting inside the loop. That's very disruptive when you do that. So let's look at this. Whew. I probably need to edit this slide. Hang on just a second. Something happened here. Give me just 1 second. I don't know what happened here. Something got messed up with my slide. I apologize. I don't know why that happened. It shouldn't have happened because it was good to go when we started. Okay, so the OODA loop is observe, orient, decide, and act. Now, as a combat pilot, you're taught, you train. You're doing this in your head constantly. You never stop observing what the enemy is doing, orienting yourself to your greatest advantage. Decide what you're going to do. Take action and immediately start observing what happened with your opponent and what you need to do to reorient, make a new decision, and act again to counter that. And so if you think about this as a loop, what you're trying to do in business or what you're trying to do in combat is get inside the opponent's loop, because then you disrupt his decision-making process. And look, in companies, it doesn't matter quite as much at FedEx Ground, but in the other world, it does matter that you're competing effectively, right? And one of the ways you do that is get inside the loop of your opponent and disrupt his strategy, disrupt his decision-making, and disruption is the key. And so this is a very complex diagram, but essentially this is describing the OODA loop, right? The approach explains how being nimble, being agile can overcome raw power. That's what the idea is, right? And so you're just constantly going through this loop. It's very similar to the Eisenhower matrix. It's just looking at it a little bit different way, right? And so let me make another change here so you can see this. I apologize for this poor slide. We haven't had that in all these webinars, but this one's not good. Okay, so this kind of summarizes the OODA loop, and you might want to think about it. There are plenty of businesses that use the OODA loop as their central decision-making process. Okay, it takes a little work to understand it, but look, it's observe, orient, decide, act. And as soon as you act, you're observing again. You see here, you're going forward, feeding forward, and then as you act, everything is feeding back. The decision, the actions, you know, you might make a decision based on what part of the country you're from, how you see the problem, etc. All this feeds back to observation, in which then could be new things happen, and you're fighting this guy, and all of a sudden a second guy appears. Oh man, that changes the ball game, right? So now you have to do something else, but it's velocity matters. So as Sun Tzu said, this is extremely important in your company. And I'm going to tell you why I like this phrase. Victorious warriors win first, and then they go to war. That was Sun Tzu. And then he said, defeated warriors go to war and then seek to win. Okay, so this was written over 2,000 years ago and essentially says success is 100% dependent on planning and initiative. So if you want to be successful, you have to have clear-cut insights. You have to think tactically, implement the appropriate strategy to support that, and you got to have a confident organization. So it's always all generals, all admirals, everybody who runs military operations live and eat, not, well, in the U.S. anyway, this is how we do business. And so when you hear me talk about scenario planning, that's what this is. Look, you're a FedEx contractor. You have a hard job, but you're not launching the space shuttle. You know all the elements of your business. You know everything that could happen, right? You know every breakdown that could happen. You know everywhere it could happen. You know all the people involved in it. You know all the problems you could ever encounter. So spend the work, spend organizational effort in your company, prioritize the things that you think are most likely to happen, and then write a plan for how to deal with it. Plan ahead. If I have a blowout between Birmingham and Huntsville on Interstate 65, I'm going to call this company to come help me. If I have a blowout between Huntsville and Nashville, I'm going to call that company to come help me. I'm going to notify these people inside my company. I might send someone up there with another truck. All these things, all those things you already know. There will be nothing that happens when you have a blowout that you don't already know. So plan for it in advance so that when something happens, your operations manager is executing the scenario plan. In the military, we call them war plans. We had thousands of them, literally thousands of them. So if a certain corner case appeared, somebody would reach into the vault, pull out a plan, and it was already set up. Okay? So that's what Sun Tzu was saying over 2,000 years ago. He's 100% right. You should arrive on the battlefield having already won the game. You should manage your company like that. It's really key. Okay, that's the OODA loop. So we've looked at a few methods. We've looked at the Eisenhower priority matrix. We looked at the OODA loop. Now we're going to look at another one. This comes from the American Society for Quality. As you guys know, I've talked about being a certified quality manager by the American Society for Quality. That's essentially, it's not awarded as a college degree, but to get that certification and the final exam is essentially a master's degree in quality. And when I say quality, I don't mean it's something good or bad. I mean, are you running your business the right way under the core principles that we discussed in sessions 5 and 6? Okay, so the cycle that we use in the quality world is called plan, do, check, act. It's essentially an iterative process in which you start small and constantly improve. It's a continuous improvement process. Okay, and I used it in my trucking company. Sometimes you can't do it all at the same time, but you can iterate your way there. We do that in the software. We knew that we were going to be better later than we are now. This is why we release something every 2 weeks. If we waited until it was perfect, remember, perfect is the enemy of good, then we would have never put a software out. So we had to get something out, and then we iterate on improving that using plan, do, check, act. You plan it, you do it, you check it, and then you act to correct it. So that check is the future proof, right? You did something, did it work? Yeah, it worked. What could we do better? So you act to improve the plan, you do it again, you check it, you act to improve it, this is a circle, right? And most of the time when you see it, it's presented to you in a circle. Plan is recognize an opportunity and plan a change. So make a decision. Test it when you did it. Might carry it out on a small scale, or you might not have the small scale available to you. Then check it. Review the test, analyze the results, and see what you've learned, what more data you might need to collect, how you might need to execute better. You might have made the perfect decision and somebody didn't do a good job. Well, that's good information to have, and you know where you need to go work on that. And then take action to improve the system after you learned it, okay? This is a core principle of all Baldrige Award-winning companies in the country. Those who win the award for having the best quality programs, they just live, eat, and breathe, plan, do, check, act. Notice how similar it is to the OODA loop. Now, it's almost exactly the same using different words. Now, it is an iterative process in combat, but the velocity is huge, right? So that's one of the key differences. Essentially, what this is a simple and effective approach for solving problems and managing change. Everybody can comprehend this process. You could teach it to anyone, and then you just teach them. This is consistently improving. Okay, we're working on our truck plan. We got better. We collected some information. We found that we need to change this. So then we get better. Maybe you pull some drivers into it. Maybe you talk to FedEx about something, and you just keep going round and round and round the circle. Things get better, 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 better. Remember, we want to go 1-0 today. So tomorrow we can go 1-0 again. This is how you want to execute. You want to focus on execution with flawless execution. And to get flawless execution, you have to plan. Okay? All right. Okay, so what's the summary of this webinar? Take the time to define how your organization will make certain types of decisions. We talked about that. Scenario planning. It is a powerful, powerful tool. Okay. Here's an example. This is not FedEx related. As I've said many times, I used to manage a global organization in a Fortune 500 company. And sometimes that meant that you had your people in places where things were not all hunky-dory, shall we say. And so I had intel briefings every morning on what countries I had people in and where was the potential problem. I managed an international organization during the SARS virus that was sweeping Asia. I had people there, and I had to manage that. In fact, I was there during that. You know, I had people in Europe when things went on there. But the one I want to tell you about is I had people on the ground in Argentina. We were building a big network for Telecom Argentina, and Argentina, as you know, has struggled politically at times, and we're following the politics. So we actually created a plan, a scenario plan, like I'm telling you right now. We had a written plan of what we're going to do and when we were going to do it. And one of the ways we enabled that plan is we made contact, somehow it worked, with the action officer in the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires. And we talked to him every week. And we had a scenario plan. Our guys were moving around the country, so we had to know what we were going to do. And we had this, the trigger was this. The action officer said, if I ever tell you to go, you need to go. We said, Roger that. So we created a plan so that wherever our guys were in the country, if that moment we got a call from the embassy that said, get the hell out of the country, we were, in 5 minutes, we were moving to the airport. Okay. And so we had this plan laid out, and I had a senior guy working for me that was in charge of that. And sure enough, one day he calls and he said, get your guys out. Now, it just happened to be that he called in the morning and our guys hadn't left the hotel yet. So literally in 30 minutes, my guys were at the airport. We didn't even have plane tickets for them yet. We just told them, get your stuff and get out. Get straight to the airport. That was our plan. And then the rest of my team was figuring out what we're going to do while they were en route. And then, of course, I had to start telling the rest of the organization what's going on. So I started with the Latin America sales VP, and I called her up and said, this is what's happening. She says, well, we need this and we need that. And I said to her, I think you're misunderstanding the conversation. I'm not calling to ask your permission to do something. I'm telling you what we've already done. We're leaving the country. I'm just giving you a courtesy notification. And then, of course, I had to talk to the head of sales, who was her boss, and I explained it to him. And he's like, that sounds like the right decision to me. And then another guy calls me from the Latin American sales team, and he says, Tim, I'm in the hotel. I'm looking out the window. I don't see anything. I said, when you can see it from your hotel room, it's too late. Right? So we had our triggers. We had our scenario plan, and we executed it flawlessly, because the next day outside that hotel, people were dying in the streets. Okay, so that's playing with the big boys, and that's how you leverage Sun Tzu's guidance. That's how you win the war before you fight it. You need to do that in your company, and you can do it. It's not overtly difficult, but it takes commitment and focus. Maybe you allow yourself 30 minutes a day or 1 hour a day to put these plans in place, and you will be a much better managed company if you do it, because you're formalizing what you're reducing alternatives, right? You're helping your people make decisions by establishing the process and the planning in advance. Write it down. Train your team. Plan, do, check, act. So when I was running the network that carried all the 2/3 of all financial trades in the United States every day ran through my hands, about $260 billion a day. Okay, we went 8 years with no outage minutes. It's just crazy what we were able to do. But I actually had equipment that moved up and down the network that was just for training purposes, where guys practice what to do in the event of an outage or a degradation. We never stopped training. Okay, we trained every single day. Now this we obviously did it in the military, but in this organization we had things to do, but we set aside time every day to practice our worst case scenarios. And when they happened, we handled it because we had already done it 100 times. Okay, drill your team on what to do if somebody has a wreck. You got to know what to do. Okay, you're going to put your best foot forward in that case, because you're going to execute what you need to do from your plan, not from your memory. Because when it happens, you're going to be rattled. Trust me. I've been through it. And you're going to want to know exactly what you're going to do. Incorporate this into your written processes, okay? And deploy it to your team. So, decision science coaching, if you want me to help you, that's how you get to it. That's a complete. We're going to get to questions now, as the end of the webinar is here. So, anyway, my team, do we have questions? Let me, please allow me to look down here at my phone. Oh, wow. Somebody's challenging the fire out of me here. Let me see. So we have one question, Paulo, the one about the OODA loop. Is that the only one we have right now? Okay. All right, so let's go back up to the OODA loop. So what we have is a question that's talking about the OODA loop in the context of FedEx Ground. That's a great question. Let's see if I can come up with one here. Let's say that you're in a hub, and we know right now that there's not going to be any growth, right? There's parts of the country where they've added new facilities or moving volume to those facilities. There's been a little growth. We'll use Savannah as an example. But then there's other places in the network where nobody's running, or very few people running. We'll use that as Denver. And so, if you want to grow your company, scale matters, right? And so if you want to grow your company, then you're likely going to have to buy distressed businesses. Okay, and so to do that, then whenever one of those becomes available, sometimes they post on Facebook, which boggles my mind. I do not understand this infatuation with managing your business based on what strangers tell you on Facebook. I don't know, man. I guess there's something wrong with me. I don't quite grasp it. But I'm in this scenario. There might be a company that becomes available that you hear about. It might have come from your senior manager. It might be somebody who's in trouble and they need a contingency line haul guy because they're going to take this guy out. That happens. I've had those conversations before with FedEx Safety. So in order for you to be able to successfully execute a scenario like that, by definition, velocity is going to matter, right? And so you have to prepare in advance. The key to the OODA loop is preparing in advance so that you can recognize what you see, right? If you're fighting another jet, when you see the jet, depending on what jet you're fighting, you know what they can and can't do because you've drilled it. And you can tell by what orientation that jet takes, what he might be getting ready to do, right? And so if you're observing, if you're following all the things that we've talked about in this webinar series, and you're watching what's going on in the hub, you got your ear to the ground, you're hearing some things, all of a sudden you hear about an opportunity. Okay, so you want to orient yourself. You already know when that happens, what you're going to need to know. So for instance, you're going to want to know, how am I going to get the information about this, and what do if I get their settlements, what do I do with it? So for instance, My Ground Force, we have a version of the software where we can upload settlements from someone's company that you want to value. You want to create a valuation for that. So you, in advance, you prepare for that situation and you watch for it to happen. And then as soon as you get the opportunity, you try to position yourself so you're the guy that gets it. But the guy that gets it is going to be the guy who can bring the best deal to the table without making a mistake. So you need to understand how you would do that. Sometimes going too fast, you're going to fail, right? And so you have to evaluate that. Then decide what you're going to do and take action. Now, you kind of caught me a little bit unawares with that. That is one scenario. I will give it some thought and try to come up with some other situations where the OODA loop matters. But in general, if you go study the OODA loop, you will see that it's become the basic way that decisions get made in many industries, like the legal profession, etc. They use the OODA loop. It's focused on observing what's happening, adjusting to what. So if you're a lawyer, as an example, you're watching what's happening, you see what the other attorney did, so you adjust to what he did so you can try to get inside and disrupt his strategy. You can only do that because you're prepared in advance. You make a decision, you get inside the loop, you disrupt him, he's going to respond to that and try to get inside your loop and disrupt you. That's how this works. Now, we don't, look, people say that we don't compete as contractors, and I disagree with that. Okay, everybody now is going to need to try to be gold or silver. You're trying to not be that bronze guy. Okay, bronze is going to be bad. I'm telling you, 2 consecutive quarters of bronze, and people are going to get OTCs. And then you're going to get 30 days. You got an OTC, and if you stub your toe after that, you're going out of business. Okay, so this is serious business. Okay, and so now I'm a fan of the metals program. I'm not a huge fan of how it's being implemented at the moment. Just the way the Vettermetrics came out a few years ago, all Jack it figured out. Okay, so there's some fundamental flaws in it at the moment, but the concept is okay. But you got to run your company in an organized way to take advantage of situations that present themselves to you. And only way you can do that is plan ahead. So I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it did. If I didn't answer your question, please email me at support@mygroundforce.com, and I will get on the phone with you and we will talk. Okay, so are there any other questions out there on decision making as a science? We've defined decisions. We've defined some methods that you can use to make decisions, the elements of decision making. We've given you several different ways to prioritize, analyze, and execute decisions. We've given you some coaching on how to keep your mind clear so that you can execute these decisions with a clear mind. And you've got several options there on how you would do it. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you have other questions, please let us know. Just a quick reminder, then 3 weeks from tomorrow is going to be the Line Haul Summit. If you haven't not yet registered for the summit, it's the best event all year that you can go to help you become a better line haul contractor. The FedEx event in Orlando is a really good event, but it's the FedEx agenda. It's not the contractor agenda. And it's a a great experience, but it's also dictatorial, right? If you come to the Line Haul Summit, it's all about contractors. It's contractors helping other contractors. There's no FedEx people there. We don't have FedEx people involved at all. They don't even attend. So if you're not already signed up, please sign up. You can go to linehaulsummit.com to sign up. Use the coupon code GroundForce24 to get a discount on your registration. We'd love to have you there. My Ground Force is a gold sponsor. We'll have a huge presence there, and we'll be able to do anything you might want to do with the software. Okay, well, again, we appreciate everybody participating in this webinar series hosted by me, Tim Goff, the founder of My Ground Force, an AI software solution that fully automates line haul companies. And in particular, with our new Fusion service, we can run your entire company for you. You just have to provide operations managers. The rest of it we can handle. So give us a call. This particular webinar series is Prosper During the FedEx Transformation. Learn to think like a Fortune 500 executive. Today we talked about decision-making as a science. Next week, we're going to talk about strategy. Okay, so next week is session 11, and we're going to talk about developing a strategy. What are the elements of strategy? What are the different ways to do it? How does it apply to a line haul company? And then, of course, we've talked about session 12, which is the week before the Line Haul Summit. We're going to have an in-depth conversation about what if you ignore all 11 previous sessions. If you don't take advice or take to heart any of that, then we're going to talk about why good companies go bad. And we've talked about it a little bit, but that's what's coming in this webinar series. We really appreciate everybody participating. We've had a lot of reviews, very positive reviews. We appreciate that. And so we're already planning a new webinar series for the fall based on some of your feedback. So again, Prosper During the FedEx Transformation. Learn to think like a Fortune 500 executive. See you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time when we talk about strategic development. This is Tim Goff. Thank you. Have a great week.